Hi, I'm Karen Morgan, and I'm with the AARP Maryland Executive Council, an elite fraud volunteer and advocate here during Protect Week. During Protect Week, we focus on elder financial exploitation, and we bring you a series of social media interviews with experts in the field so that you can help protect yourself. So we have an interview with Sue Rogan, who is with the Cash Campaign of Maryland. Sue, we are so happy to have you here. Let me
Thank
just say a
you.
couple of things about Sue. She's Director of Strategic Partnerships, and she leads the financial capability team for Cash Maryland campaign. Okay, Eleanor, can we start again, please? I totally screwed that up. Can we start again? Hi, I'm Karen Morgan, and I'm with the AARP Maryland Executive Council here during Protect Week, where we focus on elder financial exploitation and the ways in which people can protect themselves. So, what we like to do during Protect Week is to bring you a series of social media broadcasts with experts in the field so that you can more effectively protect yourselves and your family against the scourge of elder financial exploitation and just fraud in general. So today we have with us Sue Rogan with the Cash Campaign of Maryland. Now, Sue comes by this position very honestly, as she used to be a consumer protection investigator for Montgomery County. Right now, she's Director of Strategic Partnerships, and she leads the financial capability team at the Cash Campaign of Maryland, and she's very knowledgeable on all things financial literacy and fraud. Sue, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Karen.
Yeah, we're really happy that we're lucky and happy to have you here because you're sort of in the trenches when it comes to dealing with people who run up against the headwinds of keeping their finances safe and trying to figure out what to do because information can be so confusing. And that's not even counting the scams that are out there. It was confusing before the scams. With the scams, it's like, oh my goodness, why even get out of bed? So let's get right into our subject of the day. Why don't you tell me from the cash campaign perspective, what are some of the most prevalent financial scams that people are telling you about these days?
Well, Karen, good question. We are hearing from a lot of people, and it's sort of mirroring the Federal Trade Commission, which, as you know, is the federal government's consumer protection agency, the data that they released for 2024. They found that $12.5 million had been scammed from consumers in America in 24, which was a 25% increase from the previous year. And something that they noted that was very interesting is that the number of complaints didn't increase, but the percentage of people who lost money to scams increased dramatically. So
Mhm.
they were noting that the first type of scam that they were seeing a lot of is the imposter scam. And we're hearing it too in our classes and our different programs. So imposter scams, as you know, are where anybody pretends to be something that they're not in order to try to get money or data from a consumer. So, for example, some of the ones that we're hearing a lot of is the increase in romance scams, where people are
Mhm.
pretending to have a relationship with someone. They really work to gain their confidence, really, promoting themselves to them, and eventually will be asking for money. And so it's really devastating to people who feel like they've been taken advantage of. And we even heard about one consumer in Maryland who, in spite of being told by numerous law enforcement agencies that she's being a victim of a scam, she's actually going to sell her home to actually send this money to the scammer.
Oh my goodness.
They are incredibly effective at what they do. Some of the other imposter scams we're hearing about are somebody pretending to be the IRS, calling someone saying they owe back taxes. They need to pay it right here, right now. Or
Mhm.
there's a problem with your social security number. You need to pay something right here, right now. And we're seeing a real increase in the number of fraud that's being perpetrated either by text messages or social media. So
Mhm.
text messages, I was literally doing a training, Karen, a couple of weeks ago for social service practitioners about consumer protection and fraud. And within that training, we're talking about text messages. 4 people pulled up their phone. They had literally just gotten the message about there's a UPS package we're trying to deliver to you. Click here. So, all those, and it made some of them concerned, like, oh, well, maybe I am missing a package. I'm like, no, you're not. No, you're not.
No, you're not. And they know where you live
Yes,
because you've probably gotten packages there before.
right. And we're also seeing a lot of fraud messages coming around employment. So people are getting messages saying, we have this fully remote, highly paid job for you. Please click here. So those are some of the examples of some of the really newer and updated fraud methods that we've been seeing.
Yeah, it really can be confusing because at the end of the day, it's like you can't trust what you're reading, you can't trust what you're hearing because it could be a fake voice. You can't even trust what you're seeing because that could be a deep fake. And so, how do you manage in a world where you literally can't trust your five senses? That's what we're being faced with these days.
Right. And I think to your point, we need to recognize now that these criminals, and I feel they are criminals or
Oh, they
taking money from
absolutely
people,
are.
that they are getting very sophisticated. There was a call center that got shut down in another country after it took $10 billion from Americans. And this call center had the exact same structure as any kind of corporation. It had an HR
Mm-hmm.
department, had a marketing department, had a legal department. It was totally set up just to scam people. So we say that to make people understand that it's very sophisticated, this business of scams now. And so some of the things we need to be careful about while not being stressed about it is making sure that we never act quickly. So if we're going to get a
Mm-hmm.
message that says, you need to do this now, that's a sign that says, stop, just wait.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to do that now. You need to take time to think it through. You need to take time to ask someone who you trust. Does this seem legitimate? And we always recommend that people never respond to a message, whether it's an email or a text message, in that venue. So if you
Mm-hmm.
think you owe the IRS, don't respond to that text message. You likely don't. Get in touch with the IRS. Talk to your tax professional. Don't respond to that message that came to you directly. If you think your bank is contacting you because there's something wrong with your account, don't respond in that method. Go contact your bank. So making sure that we pause and that we look for these errors in spelling, that we look for the unusual requests for money in terms of gift cards and cryptocurrency. Those are huge
Mm-hmm.
red flags that this is an absolute scam.
And sometimes, though, I have to say that it can still be confusing, which is why, I tell people that anyone can be susceptible to a scam. It never had to do with how smart you are.
Right.
That has been a myth from the time that it was perpetrated. It has always been about how emotional you are. And I can remember being at a store and just buying something. It didn't cost very much, but the my charge card was declined. And then I got a text message from the bank saying, "Was this you?" And of course, I responded immediately, and I'm a so-called fraud expert, and I still responded to the text message. No, that was me. We need to let this go through. It's only $5. What are you sweating me about? So, it's just, but I still clicked on the text message, and after that, I thought, I probably shouldn't have done that.
And Karen, to your point, I was just talking with someone who got a phone call allegedly from their doctor's office saying, we're going to offer you this free nutrition counseling or a health coach, all of which seemed legitimate. And so the person kept on talking, was like, well, I am kind of interested in that, And then something went ding when that person on the phone said, I just need your birthday to be able to continue and get you enrolled in this service. Fortunately, a
Hmm.
little ding went off for that person. And they're like, hold on, if you're my doctor, you know my birthday. So they hung up right
Yes.
away, called their doctor, found out that was a scam because they're all trying to find maybe little bits of information. It's not so much where scammers are going to call you and say, hey, Karen, what's your social security number? Because they know you know enough not to do that. But we may give out little pieces of information that they then compile in a big database on us and sell that. So
Hmm.
any personal information is meant to not be given out to anybody who you are not initiating the conversation with.
And something else that these scammers do is they'll do something like, here's the information I have about you. You don't have to tell me anything. I'll just tell you what I have. And and then you can just, say okay if it's correct. But I don't want you to actually tell me because I know you're concerned about fraud. They actually say these things. And what what we end up telling people is that no matter what information they have on you, it's in a database or it's in social media or it's in the public domain somewhere. So even if they can tell you your name and your birth date and how many children you have and the house and all that stuff, that can be accessible publicly. Just because, or the last four of your social or the last four of your charge card, doesn't mean that they actually know you. They
Right.
just have this information that they've acquired from databases or other areas. So
Absolutely.
verify nothing.
Right. Absolutely. And not giving out any little piece of information, not your address, not your dog's name, not anything.
Yeah,
And
especially the dog. Don't ever give out the dog's name.
agreed. Agreed.
So we have a situation where these criminals, and you were absolutely right, they are criminals, and that's the nicest word that we have for them today, because it's a holiday weekend, so we're going to call them criminals. But they're impersonating legitimate organizations. So what is it that people can do to verify that they're actually talking to the real organization or representative from that real organization?
So, a couple of things, and it's something for all of us to keep in our minds and to really talk to friends and family about as well. So, one, you want to make sure again that you're not responding in the method of which they reached out to you in. So, you don't respond to that text message or that email. You reach out to the company that allegedly is contacting you, which likely they're not, to make sure that they really were trying to reach you. Again, whether it's a credit card company, your doctor's office, the IRS, whoever it might be. Always they can look for the websites that might look a little fishy or a little strange, it doesn't actually match up your exact doctor's email address or something like that. So
Mm-hmm.
make sure again that we pause and that we wait and we try to understand, is this really something coming from my doctor? And you may have gotten these too. When you have an appointment, they send you typically a text and say, click here to do your check-in. I never
Mm-hmm.
click on those. I go to the website directly from my physician and do the check-in from there. I don't know. It could have spoofed my doctor, right? So I'm
Well,
never clicking on text messages and links in emails or text messages at all.
that's an excellent point, because I think we are lulled into a false sense of security when we get the text. We know that we have an appointment coming up.
Right.
And I mean, this has happened to me. I've gotten the text message saying, please verify, just put in whatever to confirm or change. And you do just kind of click on that without thinking.
Mhm.
And the check-in, you're giving very sensitive information.
And they
So
can easily spoof that.
they
Easily.
could easily spoof that. So you're absolutely right. The best thing to do, and I'm saying this because I'm guilty, the best thing to do is to go directly to the doctor's website and check in from there. That is excellent advice.
And that's one thing I've been trying to kind of talk to different doctors' offices and be like, you sure you should be doing this? Why don't you tell people to go right to your website? But, they find it efficient and easy, but it does open us up to some risk. So it's really up to us to make sure that we're being careful who has information on us. Even the phone apps that we all download, maybe not thinking and looking at it, it now has access to GPS. It now has access to my photos. Why does this app
Hmm.
need access to my photos and GPS? So even being
Exactly.
careful on anything we download on our phone, because it's getting other information that we actually gave it permission to that we probably shouldn't have.
Right, right. And I mean, that's one thing that I liked about the Android platform, because, a few years ago they made a big deal, rightfully so, that they would give you the list of permissions that the app wanted, and
Mhm.
then you could decide if you want to download that app or not. But what they left begging was, as a consumer, you don't know what permissions an app needs to actually work or what's just extra. There was no guidance in that. So it didn't work as well as it could have. But you're right, there are apps that I try to limit the number of apps that I have on my phone, period. Every app is a vector for personal information,
Mhm.
distribution that I may not be aware of.
In fact, the
So,
Federal Trade Commission took action against a company who had a phone app who was collecting geolocation of individual consumers. It's literally recovery centers, reproductive centers, very sensitive data, particularly if anyone is a victim of domestic violence. We want to be very careful what data is
uh,
given out on them. And they were sharing that, they're selling that data to other companies. So the Federal Trade Commission did take action against them. But as consumers, to your point, we need to make sure that we know what permissions these apps have on our phone.
And the other thing, getting back to the doctor's offices, the other thing that just my pet peeve is every doctor's office is still, they have the same form that they've had since the beginning of time that asks for your social security number. It's like, stop doing that.
Yeah.
You don't need my social security number. And I wish I could say that to all this. Stop asking. You don't need it. You have the insurance information. And if you really need the social security number, you can get it from there. But the other thing that I tell people is that the only people who really need your social are the people who are paying you. When was the last time your doctor paid you? Because if your doctor's not paying you, your doctor does not need your social security number.
You're right. We need to minimize who has access to our personal information and find out how they're protecting it.
Right. And that's the other thing. And doctors' offices are bound by HIPAA regulations and laws, but mistakes can be made and they can be breached. And if they're breached, and that means you're breached.
Yeah.
You know, so let me ask you this. I mean, Cash Campaign of Maryland is all about financial education, financial literacy. So how do you weave in preventing scams into the whole financial education kind of landscape to help people?
Well, great question. A lot of financial experts really just focus on, creating that spending plan or building credit. But at Cash, we've always believed that it's really important to add consumer protection into our content and curriculum and our work with individuals, because we've seen the impact of someone losing thousands of dollars to a consumer scam that likely will never come back. That $12.5 billion that Federal Trade Commission talked about, that's not coming back to consumers. That money's gone. It's in other countries. It can't be replaced. It really derails someone's financial health to have lost money to a consumer scam. So we make sure that we're always talking about it, including it in our classes, having webinars on our website, because it's just critical to have people understand how to avoid losing money and how to protect their data. Again, a lot of people don't really view and realize that consumer data is big money these days. There's a big market for it. People are all trying to get it. They're all trying to sell it. And we want to minimize how much information people have on us. So it's something that we find as a big important piece of a person's financial health, is to avoid losing money or losing data.
And I know for a lot of people, it feels like we're talking about closing the corral after the horses have already left. But even with that, even with all the data breaches and literally billions, if not even like trillions of records just out there, it's still important to protect your financial information and your personal information, because I think one of the only positive things about all this information being out there is that you can kind of hide in plain sight. I mean, they got to find you first, and good luck, wading through a trillion records to find that one person that you're trying to scam. So at least that's something,
Right.
but you still need to keep your personal information just safe. So when you tell people about this with regard to financial education, what is their response? How do they feel? Are they receptive to this, or what kinds of questions do they ask?
Well, a lot of times they have a story to share. I have never conducted a financial education class or training where someone in that training has not been a victim of identity theft. Hasn't happened in all these years. And the person is usually willing to share what happened to them to help avoid that to happen to other people. So they really do get very knowledgeable sometimes. A lot of times, though, particularly with these new methods of financial fraud, both the text messaging, the social media, they're not as aware that if they click on this link for a very cool shirt on Instagram, that could be malware, so they're not actually really familiar with those methods of the scams. So pretty much in that class all the time, people were leaving with like, wow, thank you. And they were always like, please go out and tell your friends and family. Literally, people were talking in our classes about they go out to dinner with neighbors, and after they go through how you doing, what shows you watching, then they've been switching now to, have you seen this text message? It's a scam, so they're sort of helping to self-teach, the rest of the community as well.
So, yeah, everybody's talking about the toll scams. Like, well, did you get that? Did you get that text? Did you get this? Like, well, yeah, I did, and I haven't even been on a toll road, so I knew that was a scam. But,
But that
but
could be a scary one.
it can definitely,
Mhm.
because it could be from a toll when you were traveling a while back, or maybe you
Right.
forgot to pay it or whatever. And I like what you said, Sue, and I just want to get back to emphasizing this about taking a breath, taking a beat, is even if the criminal, and we're talking about criminals here,
Mhm.
tells you that the police are on their way to arrest you, that's not going to change in 5 minutes.
Right. Right.
In the first place, if they tell you the police are coming to arrest you, that's a scam, because the police never warn you that they're coming to arrest you.
Right.
They just come and arrest you. So
Right.
if you're being warned about being arrested, that's a red flag. But even if that wasn't the red flag, it's not going to change in 5 minutes.
Right.
Even if your grandchild mowed over 85 million villagers in the tsunami, that's not going to change in 5 minutes. You can take 5 minutes to just sort of take a deep breath and let the emotions calm down so that your analytical mind can
Yes.
ramp up, because they can't operate at the same time.
Right.
So if your analytical mind gets the time to engage, then you're more likely to spot those red flags. Maybe it's not a misspelled word, but it may be the demand for
Mhm.
money. You
Mhm.
need to pay right now, or
Right.
the demand that money be paid in a specific way,
Right.
you
And I
know?
encourage people to try and identify, particularly as we age, because we all know in reality, life gets tougher as we get older. Our cognitive ability declines a bit, individuals very much, but it does get a little harder to do that analytical reasoning. So I encourage people sometimes to try to have a trusted family member or friend that if they get something, contact them and say, "What do you think about this?" Just to kind of
Mm,
get somebody else's eyes and thoughts on it before acting on it.
I heard a person refer to that as getting a fraud buddy, which I love that idea. It's like, yes, you can be a fraud buddy for
Yeah.
somebody, and you can ask for somebody to be a fraud buddy for
Right.
you. I just love that idea. So like I called my sister, and I'm like, listen, if you get a phone call that you have questions about, or text message, I'm your fraud buddy. Call me, and we'll figure it out together.
I was working with a gentleman who was in his 70s. He was so excited about doing his taxes online. He's like, "Yes, I've got this technology. I can do it." Well, sure enough, a pop up thing came up. Sure enough, he clicked on it. Long story short, the criminals took everything off his computer. Everything
Oh.
had to be changed for him.
Mm.
And he was telling me he wished he had called his daughter before clicking on that pop up ad. But he was just
Mm-hmm.
trying to do something independently. And so, just making him feel like it isn't something you did wrong. These are criminals trying to get at you. So we're going to remediate everything. We're going to fix it. But in the future, I like your language, try to have a fraud buddy. Call your family member before you click on something or you respond to something.
Right. Because really what these criminals are doing is they're weaponizing our emotions against us. So if you're in the moment, and you're in the middle of a sensitive financial transaction, and this screen pops up, you just want the screen to go away.
Hmm.
And you just want to make it stop. And so that's the amygdala being hijacked, and your fight or flight response kicking in. But if you take 5 minutes to just think about what's going on here while you're turning off your computer, by the way, then you might realize that, as it turns out, Microsoft, Google, and Apple don't actually care whether your computer works,
Right.
and they never have.
Right.
So if they're telling you that they care, that would be the red flag. They
Right.
don't care.
Right. Yeah. You need to purchase a protection plan with them and you contact them directly. They don't send you little messages that say, "Hey, you need our help."
Yeah, gee, we noticed that your computer's not working right today. No, they didn't notice that.
Right.
They're too busy making $1 trillion.
Yeah.
So, so that, I mean, that is really helpful. And the work that you do for the Cash Campaign of Maryland is so helpful, because if people do become more financially literate, then they also develop better ways to spot a scam,
Mhm.
and to maybe stop the scam, or at least keep it from happening to them, preventing it before it kicks in.
Right. That's
So
our
that
main message, is to not have the money go out, because you're not going to get it back. So we want to prevent it from ever leaving your possession.
exactly. Exactly. And one of my other pet peeves I'll just mention is when we talk about people losing money. And in my presentations, I'll tell them, remember, you didn't lose the money.
Right.
It was stolen
Yep.
from you. So you know where it's supposed to be. You knew where it was yesterday. It was
Mhm.
stolen. That's why it's not there now. So you didn't lose anything. So again, it's just like more language in which somehow the responsibility is placed on the victim. It's like, oh, well, that poor person lost all their money. No, they didn't lose anything. It was stolen.
Yep. The criminal
Um,
attacked them. Yep.
the criminal attacked them. Exactly. Exactly. Well, so we are getting towards the end of our time here. So thank you so much for joining us. And while you're still here, I will just put in a plug for AARP Maryland's Protect Week campaign. Cash Campaign Maryland has been an awesome partner of Protect Week really since the inception, I believe, right?
Mhm.
Since we started with Protect Week, which I think we're going on like 10 years now. So Protect Week is our elder financial exploitation prevention campaign. We shine a spotlight on the scourge of elder financial abuse. And we also provide resources so that people can figure out ways to protect themselves and their families. Cash Campaign is a big part of that. So please attend their classes, look into the resources that they offer, but also go to aarp.org/Maryland/Protect Week to see the resources that we're offering to protect yourselves and your families against fraud. They're free to anyone. You don't have to be a member. You don't have to be a certain age. Just come on down and figure out what these scammers are doing to separate you from your money. Thank you so much, Sue. We really appreciate having you and taking time out of your busy schedule because, protecting people against fraud is a full-time job. So
Well,
we
thank you
really,
so much for having us, Karen. Thanks so much for doing this outreach campaign. It's incredibly important.
and we think what you do is just as important. So thank you. All right, take care.